Last week, I flew out to Long Island because I was speaking for the Long Island Reef Association, and I stopped by the aquarium because if you're going to go to Long Island, you have to go to the Long Island Aquarium. And of course, visit the 20,000 gallon reef. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about a flood that happened to this fish store. The Island Fish and Reef fish store on Long Island, New York, was completely underwater. And here is some video that I grabbed from their Instagram account. So what had happened was a storm had come into town and it was 12 inches in one day flat. And the parking lot has floor drains or street drains or whatever you call those, the sewer system. And those were obstructed to the point where all the water in the lot came pouring down the stairs and filled up this fish store to waist level. This store is located in a basement of a building, and there's nowhere for the water to go once it comes pouring down other than to pump it back up and out of the building. And initially they were pumping it out, but it was coming back in until they finally figured out how to just get the water out completely. It was quite the undertaking, and I've heard that they've had to deal with a flood a couple of times. So a lot of the property was damaged, a lot of things were thrown away, cabinetry and so forth, electronics were ruined, and they've made a lot of changes in the store since. What I did not know is that I would be coming to this exact fish store to give my presentation, and I was shocked at how great the store looked. You never would have known about this flood if it wasn't for their Instagram post. Later in this video, you're going to see what the store looks like. And I had a great time, and everyone there was super nice. But first, let's go check out the public aquarium, because that is a huge highlight of the trip. The Long Island Aquarium is a couple of hours or so away from JFK Airport, but once you're there, you get to enjoy a 20,000 gallon living coral reef. And this tank is now, it's been around 25 years. And about 3 years ago, it went through a monster reset. I mean, completely drained, everything removed, started from scratch, and this is what it looks like now. If you didn't see the walls around it, if you could just put your face down in there, you would think you're on a completely natural reef, nothing man-made about it. It's that impressive. The rockwork is essentially completely invisible, and you can see that for yourself. Perhaps you've already seen this aquarium once before on this channel. That video has been viewed over 1.5 million times, and that was the old version. So this is actually really, really interesting to see what it looks like now. A lot of the huge fish are gone. There's a few big ones, but mostly Joe Aiullo's desire was to have a tank completely filled with lots of activity, lots of small fish, to continue to give it a good sense of scale. Because when you have a few whales swimming around, it just kind of throws off your perspective entirely. Now that being said, that Sohal tang right there and the unicorn tang are massive fish. Look at it. Look at that thing. I know my lens is in wide angle right now, but that fish was easily 2 feet long. But then look at these little tiny Bengay cardinal fish. These things were like 1/8 of an inch. I mean, they're smaller than the tentacle of the anemone. That's how small they are in this massive exhibit. I believe this tank is something like 30 feet long, 14 feet front to back, 7 feet tall. And Joe gets in there several times a week in a scuba suit to tend to his reef garden. I didn't mention why the tank had a reset, but what had occurred was basically there was a really, really bad level of palytoxin in the aquarium to the point where Joe couldn't even get in the water anymore because he'd end up being super sick and stuck in bed for days after he got out. It was just penetrating every single thing of it, and it was affecting the health of the corals in the exhibits. It was a major problem, and the only solution was to drain it, bleach it, and start brand new. And since then, eliminating some of these problems that were in the past, he's had phenomenal growth. And it's just so impressive what he's been able to accomplish. That being said, there is a current plague in this tank that he is still combating, and it's a type of parasitic copepod that acts like jumping spiders. I mean, as soon as you try to remove even the colony that they're on, they scatter in every direction away. They seem to be very, very small, whitish, and he calls them. And he said if it wasn't for them, that coral right there would be fine. but instead that coral looks sick because of them. The identification of them has not occurred yet. I'm hoping he will get some answers at some point. But, obviously, as hobbyists, we always are super concerned about pests in the aquarium and how to keep them out. Joe has quite the Tubastria collection going on here. There's even some dendros in there. And that copper band, don't worry, it's getting super well fed with all the mysis that he's dumping in these tanks constantly to grow those corals out like you see. I'm on top of the 20,000 gallon reef. Sense of scale. Joe is throwing in some food into the water. It's a bunch of PE mysis. The oils in that food make the surface of the water crystal clear so you can enjoy the corals from above. Look at that, he's got a sink on top of the tank. You may have noticed those dome-shaped lights that are hanging down over the water. Those are all metal halides because metal halides grow corals. That doesn't mean he doesn't want to use LEDs, but this tank, as I said earlier, has been running for 25 years, and a lot of these lights were bought a long time ago, and all you have to do is replace the bulbs. The ballast, the reflectors, they last indefinitely as long as they're taken care of. So he is running what works, but he's also trying out LEDs to see if they may work as well.
Yeah, the 600 now is nice. It actually replaced the LED disc on that. Is that done? Yeah. Yeah, it's four set screws. You can pull the wiring off. Take the lens.
Seeing the reef from this perspective is actually pretty uncommon. The public usually stays out in the common areas and they look at everything through the walls of acrylic or glass because they don't want anything to get into the exhibit that could hurt the livestock. But, I'm lucky that I get to go behind and get the Melev tour, and I wanted to be sure to shoot this from different angles and different spots over the tank so you could see the corals.
But yeah, it's been a fun rebuild, I gotta say.
Took a few years off the life.
Yeah.
Initially.
I know it was stressful.
And then
Did you have to change anything? I mean, up above, like all this landing, did you have to like re-bolt it, or was there? It's 100% trustworthy.
Yeah. I mean, some of the stuff over there where there was some metal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a crazy line. It's the property line.
Yeah.
Looking down from above, you can see that these coral colonies are 2 or 3 feet wide. They are just filling in beautifully, and he actually has to go in and hack out giant sections to maintain flow in the aquarium. The protein skimmer that he's had forever that he built himself continues to remove hideous skimmate. He asked me to clean this out, which of course I did not do. And while I was up on the ladder looking in that skimmer, I had to look at the reef one last time before we had to leave. However, there was a nice surprise. I got to check out the brand new under construction quarantine room that they're working on now that has multiple systems with multiple chillers. Everything has backups. It's really coming together nicely. I look forward to seeing when it's all fully operational. Everyone left me behind, but I had to stop and look at the anemones and clownfish. Each of those rows of anemones is 2 feet across. It was so cool, but we had to go. The club members were excited. There was a whole bunch of food and snacks and candy. I got to check out some of the exhibits, look at this aquarium with that lamp, and I was looking at all the products that are up high now on the walls so they can't get wet ever again. Yes, this store is now all cleaned up and everything's been restocked, so they are continuing to be in business. This is a really big zero-edge tank. I haven't seen one of these in a while. Water's running over the outside of the wall, but all the contents inside, you can see everything because there's no visible flow. It's all running on the walls of the tank. So if a snail comes on the outside, of course, water goes everywhere. You see the water goes here, and down a drain, and into the sump. If there's a sump. Maybe the sump's over there somewhere.
Take a moment,
This tank is all being lit by T5s. And here is the sum underneath. Socks, skimmers, plural, top off. And here is a frag system with ATI T5s and LED lighting. So the T5s are off right now. The LEDs are on. There's some more. This is all LEDs. It's a very nice store. There's a stripey. And look at that pavona. Wow. That's awesome. This is being lit by radions. Let's take a look at this tank. There's an Achilles. Nice hippo with a yellow belly. I believe that's a clown tang. Some pretty SPS colonies in here. As I walked around looking at this store, I just kept thinking, how did they clean it up so quickly? Well, it turns out I had the timeline wrong a little bit. I recently saw the flooded store less than a month ago, and now I'm in it, and it's perfect. But when you look at the actual flood video on their Instagram page, it was 10 weeks ago. So there was more time for them to get everything back on track, to remove all the things that got ruined, to restock, with new inventory, to make sure all the tanks were safe. But they did save a lot of livestock. They were lucky. Not everything it wasn't a total loss because the water was below the tanks. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do subscribe to this channel if you're not one yet. And I will see you guys again in about a week. I have another trip to go on this weekend. I'm going to Boston, and then I'm going to Northern Ohio.